And now our Poet's Corner with Dr. Clark Gilpin.
Dickinson manages to raise a lot of questions in only 12 lines of poetry. So what I'd like to do is read the first stanza of this poem, stop and make a very short comment, and then read the entire poem of 12 lines. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops. Dickinson is frequently portrayed as the reclusive daughter of a prosperous family who lived out her life in her father's house in the small college town of Amherst, Massachusetts. Yet I think it's crucial to remember that Dickinson's most productive years as a poet were during the Civil War. She recorded the poem, "Hope is the Thing with Feathers," in a notebook where she collected her poems sometime in the early months of the year 1862. The ferocity of the war was coming home to families and towns throughout the nation. And Fraser Stearns, the son of the president of Amherst College, died in battle in North Carolina on March 14th, 1862. It is quite possible that Dickinson copied the poem, "Hope is the Thing with Feathers," into her notebook in the days immediately preceding Fraser Stearns' funeral on March the 22nd of that year. Hope was not an emotion that rested confidently, complacently even, in the soul during those tragic and violent years. Like any small bird perched on a slender branch, hope might easily be startled and take flight. And since the bird sings the tune without the words, what meaning should we attach to this song in our soul? Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, and never, yet never in extremity, it asked a crumb of me.
Thank you, Clark. Thank you for that a little bit of history and a lot of insight. And now the Reverend Beth Lefevre will light our chalice.
Thank you. It is a joy to be back among you after way too long. In joy, we come together to ignite the flame of our chalice in the light of truth and constancy, in the warmth of love, laughter, and affection, and in the fire of passion, dedication, and commitment.
And now when our affirmation of faith appears on the screen, let us recite that in unison. Or maybe we don't, it's not going to appear on the screen. Maybe we're just going to recite it in unison. So love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now it is time for our joys and concerns.
Great to be here. I am Harvey Johnson. I am the current BUUF board president, along with Joan and Tara and Vicki and Leah and Dick and Bridget, who may be joining us via Zoom. I don't know. This is the first time we've done this. In past weeks, I could have seen their little faces on my laptop, but I'll figure out how to do that in the future. I'm sure. I'm quite impressed by what we've accomplished to make it this far. So again, welcome to our first in-person Sunday service since March of 2020, 16 months ago. 16 months of Zoom services that we did pretty darn well, but that is not what most of us desire, to look at little screens for the rest of our life. I know I don't. We desire in-person, forgive me, we desire in-person community. Regardless, we have made it work, and today we return to a hybrid in-person and online community. Our BUUF community is our chosen community, or at least one of our chosen communities that many of us are in, lots of communities. We are born into our family communities, and we hold them dear. I know I do. My family is certainly one of my beloved communities. I've just returned from Glen Lake, Michigan, up by Sleeping Bear Dunes, if some of you know where that is. Spent a whole week, which I rarely do, away from my busy Sancho life, being with my biological and extended family. In our one house, we have 5 family houses along the lake, and in my immediate family, we had about 15 of us. We've got a big house, and about 50 in 5 houses along the lake, about the size of our BUUF community. It's my Glen Lake Johnson community, so to speak. It's next to Sleeping Bear Dunes, which is beautiful section of the world, and in my homeland. BUUF is also my community. A community of like-minded, liberal, religious, socially active community. Our do-it-yourself cooperative. I think of it as sort of a co-op. We mostly do it ourselves, as you see before you, teaching ourselves and our children in the wider community the golden rule and our 7 principles: singing, welcoming, laughing, crying, mowing, fixing holes in our driveway, growing gardens here and beyond. As most of you know, what you get out of anything is about what you put into it. And I'm glad you have chosen to join us today in community. Come join us in person or via Zoom next week and the week after that. Blessed be.
Okay, I assume I have to start over. We can hear you. Pardon? We can hear you. And I'm hard of hearing. Kate Fuller, one of BUUF's founding members, presented this during the service on October 22nd, 2000. BUUF's Gospel, Good News. The good news is about our church is that it's enjoyable. It's not a serious, somber look at how sinful we are. Rather, it's a celebration of life, how good it can be. We are inspired by one another to see things in a new light, to examine our insights into what life is all about, and maybe come away on a Sunday with a new idea to think about. Sometimes we talk about an injustice we see in our larger community and decide if that's a problem we want to tackle. It could be racism, homelessness, homophobia, or poverty. Recently at a retreat we decided on some goals which were important to us. Big goals, like a director of religious education. We are not without hope for our future, our children. Another goal is to hire a full-time minister. We're in the process on that one. But the overarching good news is that we have a wonderful group of lively souls with a variety of beliefs and attitudes. Unitarian Universalism does not require us to subscribe to a set creed. Some of us are atheists, some pagans, some Christians, some humanists. Half the fun is discussing these views so we can see where the other guy is coming from. The best news for me about our group is that it's a fun place to be. The people here are respectful and tolerant of others. They keep up on what's going on and are willing to be sharers of what they see and feel. You wouldn't believe how much we learn from each other. I like going to our fellowship because I feel welcome and inspired there. I can fit into the group doing things that I like to do, singing, gardening, and serving refreshments. We party once in a while too. For me, a fellowship is like an extended family. Most of my family is somewhere else, but here I have a group of friends I can count on to care about me. When one of us has a sorrow to bear, we come together to support their sadness and do what we can to help them. The greatest joy I find at BUUF is the freedom to be me. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Charles. That was gorgeous. It's good to hear from Kate. Kate Fuller, actually my very first pastoral call was to Kate when she was on her deathbed, and that was back in 2009, I think. So, Kate, what a lovely spirit, what a lovely soul, and a founder of this congregation. So in honor of this being our first in-person service in 16 months and our first hybrid service with Zoom ever, I'm going to talk about how being part of a safe, loving community inspires us to hope by providing us with the foundation for living our greatest possible lives. Hope is the rocket fuel that powers the engines of the human soul and propels us to greater being. Hope opens us to life and its possibility. Hope is the flame that burns in us when times are bad or good. Hope sustains us even when the world seems crazy, upside down, and full of despair. Elie Wiesel, Jewish writer, survivor of the Nazi death camps, and 1986 winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, said, "Man cannot live without hope." Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Everything that is done in the world is done by hope." It is for me a basic tenet of our UU faith that we find hope in being the unique self that we are meant to be. Further, it is only from the unique self, the self embedded in a safe, loving community, that creativity flows and we receive the sustaining manna that allows us to make for ourselves interesting and compassionate lives and to make a real difference for peace, justice, and ecological sustainability. My method for today is to answer some questions that I have often been asked over the years by UUs, people of other faiths, and people who claim to have no faith at all. Hopefully the answers I give will reveal a little bit, at least, about how being a part of this religious community sustains us with the manna of hope. In the conclusion of this sermon, I will share what I believe to be a surefire method for being a hopeful person. So let's begin. Our first question is UUism really a religion? The answer to this question is yes. Because we, unlike any other mammal that we know of, are complex culture bearers, and it is pretty easy to be drawn out of our true natures by culture, we use religion, like a bit of the hair of the dog that bit us, as a way to reconnect ourselves to that which is of ultimate importance. The word religion means to reconnect or bind back. Our UU religion helps us bind back to the really real. UUs have several names for the really real, like self with a capital S, nature with a capital N, God, mother, the universe, etc. Our connection to the really real is the conduit through which hope flows. Question number 2. How do UUs define their faith? For most UUs, our main articles of faith are our first and seventh UU principles. The inherent worth and dignity of all people, and the unity of being are, as we refer to it, respect for the interdependent web of existence. These are not scientific propositions. There is nothing empirical about these ideas. That all people have inherent worth and that the all is one are purely based on faith, no less than the idea that Jesus was both human and divine, that Muhammad was Allah's one true prophet, or that the Buddha attained a perfect state of being. Inherent worth and dignity and the unity of being are primarily humanist. We attend to believe that living these propositions is a kind of love in action, which will lead to individual and community transformation and a desire to roll up our sleeves and work to address social issues like racial inequality, political polarization, and climate change. It is our theory that many social systems, including our own nations, waste people by consigning them to the status of less than. By living the principle of the inherent worth and dignity of all and the sacredness of all life, we lift up and bring ourselves and others into the creative process of solving the problems that our species face. In this, there is real hope. Question number 3. Why do UUs honor so many other faith traditions? That there are a variety of religious expressions in UU congregations is a great source of strength. Because we are all unique, it is only natural that we will choose different ways of thinking about ultimate things. Some of us prefer paganism. Many of us are religious atheists or agnostics. Others of us prefer Christian, Wiccan, Jewish, Buddhist. Many others of us are Christian, Wiccan, Jewish, Buddhist, are nature mystics. The important thing to remember is that our central faith position is that all of life is sacred and that we find tremendous strength and creativity in our diversity of religious thought. For my part, I like to think that if a religion has lasted thousands of years and has helped millions or billions of people reconnect to ultimate things, that it is still very valuable to us modern humans. And this is just me, apply psychoanalytic theory to the old religions. Most psychoanalytic theories, of which there are many, break the human psyche up into component elements like archetypes, are called archetypes. The Greek pantheon is an excellent example of the different characters of the human psyche projected onto the gods and goddesses. I am very fond of saying, we create the gods, but we do not make them from nothing. We make them from ourselves. Consequently, I view religious stories involving the gods, saints, angels, devils, heroes, villains, and prophets as the interaction between different elements of our psyches. These stories keep these parts of ourselves out in front of us and help us to manage ourselves in much better, more productive, and humane ways. Our religious stories ground us, make us stronger, compel us to make ourselves and society more just, and most importantly, lead us to hope. In this community, we tell the old stories and we tell our individual stories over and over as vehicles of transformation. By way of footnote, I think our inclusion of the great religions in our UU living tradition is a potent and hopeful example to people of all other faiths who often spend time bickering, judging, and even waging war over differences in their religious stories. How wonderful it would be if the great faith expressions could come together and do the work they were meant to do, which is bring peace, create social and ecological justice, and lift humanity out of the despair that causes so much division and hatred and wastes so much humanity. Question number 4. Does being a UU lead to salvation? I'm asked this question quite a lot, and I'm not sure I'm asked this question with kindly intent all the time. So does being a UU lead to salvation? Mostly UUs do not talk about salvation. If they did, I have a feeling that there would be as many definitions for salvation as there are UUs. For me, salvation means living one's greatest life. This is not easy. Learning how to become aware of and stand outside one's cultural programming and use it as a tool for living in artful and compassionate ways is a hard and lifelong work. It is a work that really only takes place in a loving, safe, religious community. Another definition of salvation for UUs might be the communion we experience with one another in beloved community. Sustaining manna flows from community that keeps us going in the tough times and helps us see the light in the darkest hours. Our UU community becomes a launching pad for moving us to confront the powers and principalities by demanding and working for justice for all peoples, for all species of flora and fauna, and for our beautiful blue planet home. In the beginning of this sermon, I promised you that I would share with you what I believe to be a surefire way of receiving hope, our being a hopeful person. It is a very simple equation. If you want to be hopeful, be a good person. Let me repeat that. If you want to be hopeful, be a good person. Be kind. Don't harbor grudges. Stop judging. Never pass up an opportunity to lift up another person. Be generous with your time and money. Volunteer in a soup kitchen. Be polite. Acknowledge a stranger with a smile. Work on your own darkness until you realize it too is a kind of light. Compliment a coworker. Say thank you often. Teach a religious education class for kindergartners. Mind your manners. Shovel your neighbor's driveway after a big snowstorm. Serve on a committee that is pretty thankless, like endowment. Write a letter to your congressperson. Take a hot dish to someone who is sick. Apologize for something you said 10 years ago. Volunteer to read during a children's hour at your public library. Vote. Call up an old friend. Go to church on Sunday. Seeing you there may give someone a lift. Plant a tree. Plant seeds of happiness and love. And the list goes on. Strangely, the above list reveals a bit of a paradox in our religion. We come here to work on ourselves so we can be authentic and true. Yet, if we really want to make ourselves better, more hopeful people, we must get out of ourselves and at least for a little bit put the other foremost in our thoughts and actions. The important thing to remember is, however, that hope springs from the heart of the person that does good, and that anyone can be a good person starting right now. Pliny the Elder said in the 1st century of the Common Era, hope is the pillar that holds up the world. If the world seems a little shaky for you right now, it might be time to shore up your pillar by seeking out and doing good. It is the one surefire way of inviting hope to flow through you. And by the way, this BUUF community, you, all of you, have been a constant source of hope for me over these long pandemic months. I often came away from our Zoom services and our numerous Zoom meetings with a smile on my face and a song in my heart. In the dark hours of waiting out COVID, you all were my strength and my inspiration. I've come to really believe, like I never had before, that the light we share here is important, not just for a small group of liberal religionists, but for a whole world that seems to gravitate towards darkness. So thank you. It is not too much to say that you mean the world to me. And now the Reverend Beth Lefevre will extinguish our chalice.
We extinguish the light of the chalice, taking with us all that for which it stands, and most especially the warmth and joy of beloved community.